Tell us about your whole experience with Lego, your role there. What were some of the standout moments for someone with a Christian belief to work for such a high-profile organisation?
Yeah, I mean, so in my career over the past 10 years or so, I've worked for a couple of different family-owned organisations. Firstly, Edelman, the global communications firm, and more recently Lego, which is obviously a family-owned Danish company passed down through the generations of the Kurt Christiansen family, which makes great toys for children around the world. And so I spent 3 years there working in social media, in innovation, and in driving our emerging platforms team, which is looking at how new technologies like voice, like chatbots and messaging and AI, and the blockchain might impact the future of that business and businesses around the world as we try to adopt technology into the enterprise. And I think my experience was a massively positive one since being there, and having left recently, I've been reflecting on it a little while. And I think one of the big things is learning what it's like to operate in a massive company with, regardless of what the company is there to do, there's something that always comes from working inside something of such a big scale, and with so many stakeholders, dependencies, and a fabulous brand that has been around for generations. And the challenge with that is, how do you steward that well? And I think it taught us a lot around what God taught to us about stewardship, not just in finances, but value in all different sorts of ways, whether that's the brand itself, whether that's the heritage of the family that owns it, whether that is the work that you're delivering day to day. So that has been one of the biggest things I've learned, is how do you steward something of such scale and importance within a big company.
Just take us back to what led you into this kind of line of work, as far as your background and your spiritual journey.
I've always had a fascination with technology and what it can do for us, ever since kind of trying to deconstruct radios and things like that as a kid. My grandfather was a broadcaster and worked as a camera supervisor and operator at the BBC for his entire career, on everything from Doctor Who to Only Fools and Horses, Top of the Pops, and all the original seasons of those shows, and Porridge and things like that. And it set off a fascination in me about the impact that particularly the spoken word and audio can have in changing people's opinions, in inspiring them, and what media and broadcasting could do. And then I kind of graduated into the business world at the dawn of the social media era and saw the impact that was going to have in completely transforming the way in which we communicate with one another and build community. And I think that's the thing, particularly along my faith journey, is something I've always wanted to interrogate and question and then experiment with, is how can technology help enable us to communicate the gospel, to evangelize and disciple the nations, but at the same time hold it in tension with some of the difficult things that technology presents to us, the ethics of things like artificial intelligence, for example, or some of the terrible things that we do see happen on things like social media. And so that's been my journey and my fascination this entire time I've worked with these areas, is to hold both of those things in tension, the latent potential of technology for good, whilst held with the massive impact that it can have in the negative as well. And trying to hold that with a spiritual discipline has been just such a joy to work with.
Tell us about some of the projects you're involved in today, and give the Signal podcast a plug as well.
Yeah, so amongst the things that I do in my now somewhat more multi-hyphenate lifestyle, as my friend Emma might say, is I'm a host of a Signal, which is the podcast from Christians in the Media, which is a monthly and sometimes more frequently show that looks at the intersection between faith and media across all different areas of media, from journalism, marketing, PR, broadcasting, and trying to interrogate how the future of the media is going to be impacted by faith, and how those of us that have faith working in the media are impacted by doing that job day to day. So that's one of the things I do, as well as also working and to grow a community that we recently launched called Voice 2. And Voice 2 is a community of those working in voice and artificial intelligence to look at how new platforms like Alexa, Google Home, and some of these conversational assistants, through to things like chatbots on Facebook Messenger, are going to change the way in which we interact with technology. And that voice in particular is such a powerful tool because it's the most simple, frictionless way of us to interact with these new computer systems. Right? You learn to speak long before you can touch, type, or swipe anything. So that's why I think that voice particularly is one of the big technologies for us to focus on. And it's something that we're going to be talking about today at the Church and Media Conference as well.
We heard some research into millennials this week. What's your observation of how they engage in new technology, particularly social media today, and how can we best reach them with the Christian message?
I think the difficulty when we say the word millennials or any generational cohort is to assume that these are all just one big group of people, and I think that we know that that is just not the case. There are some defining characteristics, however. The millennials and those that follow them, the Gen Zs and ultimately the Gen Alphas, the kind of real kids that are being born nowadays, the age of my toddlers, is that they are all defined by growing up in an era where they knew nothing other than technology, where they didn't know anything other than the internet being constantly present in their lives, in their homes, that turning on a tap at home and water coming out of it is just the same to them as booting up a browser and the internet being there. It's just nascent. And so that presents some really interesting differences about how they experience the world versus the generations that went before them. The generations that went before them knew structure, formality, days that ended, a work day that ended, family situations that had times when we were together and when we were apart. But now, with social media in particular, that all of those divides is gone. We are constantly connected to one another, and that presents a real challenge around how do we pay attention, how do we not become distracted like I'm becoming with my phone buzzing on my watch and in my pocket whilst doing an interview. How do I actually work around this constant connectedness and not have it affect me in a negative way? How do I learn to ease the tension between what real friendships look like when they are experienced and lived out in hands and feet and breathing and touching versus something that happens in a purely digital environment? And it's not to say that the digital is any less real, because it's not. It's so real. It's actually the most real in many cases for lots of these younger generations. But it does come with its own trappings that we have to work through and understand how we can wrestle with the tension of being constantly connected, but often not physically together. And I think for millennials and the generations that will follow them are going to continue to have to remember what it was like before and after technology. And we, as a responsibility of those generations that went before them, have a duty, I believe, to pass down that understanding of what it means to rest, what does it mean to be disconnected, what does it mean to live in the margins and reflect, rather than just have this constant stimulation. I think that's one of the big challenges that we all face today.